The sea is calm tonight, but beneath the silence, something ancient waits. Waves breathe softly, carrying whispers of forgotten power. Listen closely, and you may hear the voice of a restless god. Poseidon, lord of the deep, master of storms, keeper of tide. He is not only the ruler of waters, but the guardian of balance. The ocean is his kingdom, stretching beyond the horizon's edge. Every ripple, every current, moves with his unseen hand. Sailors once feared his gaze, for the sea was never truly theirs. Temples rose along the coast, offerings cast into the waves. For without his favor, no ship could trust the open sea. But Poseidon is not always kind, nor always gentle. His silence hides a force stronger than any mortal storm. The wrath of Poseidon does not shout, it waits. It waits in the tremor of the earth, in the rising of tides. It waits in the hidden depths where light cannot reach. Tonight, we begin a journey into myth and mystery. A story of pride, of warnings, and of the power of the sea. This is the hidden wrath of Poseidon. Beneath the calm skin of the sea lies a world unseen by mortal eyes. The surface glitters with sunlight, but the depths remain in eternal twilight. Shadows move where no wind reaches, and silence reigns beyond human hearing. This is Poseidon's true kingdom, where every current obeys his command. He is the unseen hand that guides the restless waters. His voice is the surge of waves, his breath the pull of tides. Above, sailors see only the blue expanse stretching endless and vast. But below, an empire of coral, stone, and shifting sands unfolds forever. Creatures born of darkness move through valleys deeper than mountains on land. Their songs, faint and ancient, rise like prayers to the god of the sea. Here, Poseidon sits upon his throne of shells and silver foam. His crown gleams with pearls, his trident hums with the rhythm of oceans. He does not need to roar. His presence shapes the water around him. Mortals think the sea sleeps when it lies still. Yet stillness is a mask, concealing power coiled like a serpent. The god waits in patience, for he knows time bends to eternity. Above, fishermen cast nets, children play upon the shore. They laugh, unaware that their world depends on the silence below. For without Poseidon's favor, the sea would rise and claim the coast. Storms would gather, waves would leap, and the land would tremble. But for now, the god holds his wrath, hidden beneath calm waters. He listens to the song of whales that drift like giants through the dark. He watches ships carve lines across the surface, proud and fleeting. Each ripple reaches him, each anchor falling echoes in his realm. The ocean is memory, and Poseidon remembers all. He recalls the first prayers whispered by sailors facing the unknown. He recalls temples carved from marble, offerings dropped into the surf. He recalls voices of kings who begged him for victory at sea. Some he favored, granting safe passage and winds at their backs. Others he ignored, their pride too heavy for his mercy. Yet his judgment is not swift, for Poseidon waits. The sea is patient, unlike fire that burns quickly and fades. It holds its anger in stillness, releasing only when balance is broken. This is the nature of the silent depths, to seem gentle but never weak. Mortals may call the ocean calm, but Poseidon knows its truth. Even in silence, storms coil unseen in the black chambers of the deep. The seabed shifts with a thought, mountains rise or fall beneath his will. Earthquakes are his footsteps, and rivers of salt water flow where he guides them. No city, no empire can defy the patience of the god of the sea. For he does not strike in haste. He waits until the moment is right. And when he moves, the world above feels his presence in waves and trembling ground. Yet most days, he chooses quiet. He chooses the silence that comforts and deceives. For mortals sleep soundly when the sea is still. They dream of safe journeys, of distant shores reached without storm. They forget that the calm is a gift, not a guarantee. In the silent depths, Poseidon sits and remembers. He remembers pride, he remembers reverence, he remembers neglect. The ocean carries these memories like treasures buried in sand. Each tide is a story, each current a lesson, each wave a warning. And so the god waits, hidden beneath the still waters. Silent, patient, eternal, Poseidon rules where no light dares to follow. His wrath is unseen, but never gone. It lingers in the depths, waiting for the day mortals forget the sea's true master. Along the ancient coasts, mortals once feared the silence of the sea. They knew that still waters could hide storms waiting in the distance. To honor the god of the deep, they built altars of stone near the shore. Fires burned at twilight, and voices rose in prayers to Poseidon. Offerings of wine, grain, and silver cups were carried by the tide. Some cast wreaths of olive and laurel, hoping for calm waters ahead. Others whispered names of loved ones, begging for safe return. For centuries, the rhythm of devotion matched the rhythm of waves. Mortals remembered the ocean was not theirs to command. They feared the storms, but more than fear, they respected the silence. But time is a thief, and memory fades like foam upon the sand. Generations passed, and reverence began to wither under pride. Ships grew larger, sails stronger, and captains bolder in their journeys. They crossed waters once thought sacred, believing skill replaced prayer. Temples crumbled, their stones swallowed by creeping vines and years. The sound of hymns gave way to the clang of hammers in shipyards. Mortals trusted their craft more than the god who ruled the depths. And though Poseidon watched, he did not move in haste. His wrath is not like fire. It does not strike without warning. Instead, he waits, patient as the sea, silent as the tide. Signs came first, small and easy to ignore. The fish vanished from shores where abundance once flourished. Tides pulled higher, flooding fields that had never touched salt water. Winds shifted strangely, carrying whispers sailors could not explain. Still, the mortals forgot, their faith drowned by their own ambition. What once was offering turned into neglect. What once was prayer became silence. And silence, when given to a god, is no offering at all. Poseidon listened, but the waves no longer carried words of gratitude. He heard no promises, no songs, only the hollow sound of neglect. And in his halls of coral and pearl, the god remembered. He remembered how mortals once bowed their heads with reverence. He remembered temples filled with song, festivals by the shore. He remembered gifts given not out of fear, but out of awe. Now, there was only arrogance. Now, mortals believed the sea was theirs to tame, not his to command. But the ocean is older than stone, older than kings, older than pride. It does not belong to mortals, no matter how high their sails. And Poseidon, master of tides, would not be forgotten forever. The forgotten offerings lay heavy in the silence of the sea. Every wave became a reminder of promises broken by mortal hands. Every current carried memories of altars now buried in sand. Still, the god waited. For wrath, like the tide, comes not in haste, but in return. The ocean does not shout when it turns. It rises slowly, unseen. Mortals still laughed upon the shores, blind to the power beneath. They trusted in wood, in rope, in the strength of their arms. But no craft, no matter how mighty, can stand against eternity. The forgotten offering stirred a silence too deep to ignore. It grew like a shadow, heavy and unseen, waiting to break. And Poseidon, lord of the silent depths, prepared to remind the world. For the sea does not forget, even when mortals choose to. The waves remember, the tides remember, the god remembers, and memory, when awakened, is stronger than any storm. In the halls of Olympus, Poseidon's voice was as deep as the sea he ruled. He stood among gods whose domains stretched across sky, earth, and flame. His trident shimmered with salt and storm, a reminder of his power. Yet power among immortals was rarely still, and rivalry grew like fire. With Athena, his quarrel was fierce and enduring. She, goddess of wisdom, claimed the city that would shine as Athens. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, bringing forth a spring. The water was strong but briny, a gift of might, not sustenance. Athena offered the olive tree, rooted in peace and endurance. The mortals chose her gift, and the city bore her name forever. Poseidon did not forget, for gods rarely forget slights. His wrath was not thunderous in that moment, but it sank deep. The rivalry lingered like a shadow, shaping centuries of myth and memory. With Apollo, too, there were disputes, woven with pride and song. Once they built walls for a mortal king, laboring in disguise. But when payment was denied, wrath stirred in both gods alike. Apollo's fire burned bright, but Poseidon's tide rose unyielding. Together they punished arrogance, yet rivalry brewed even in alliance. Each sought glory, each desired recognition from mortals and immortals alike. And then there was Zeus, king of gods, wielder of lightning, brother to Poseidon, yet often his rival in rule. The sea and the sky wrestled for dominance, storm against storm. Though united in Olympus, their pride often clashed in silence. Zeus claimed kingship, but Poseidon held the endless deep. Neither could fully yield, for eternity does not soften ambition. Their rivalries were not battles of blade, but of will. The gods do not bleed, but their pride is sharper than swords. When storms thundered across the horizon, mortals heard more than weather. They heard the arguments of sky and sea, voices colliding in fury. Every lightning strike was Zeus, every wave crash was Poseidon. Their rivalry echoed not just in heavens, but across mortal lives. Sailors prayed to the sea, farmers to the sky above. And often, they prayed both gods would not argue over their fates. The wrath of Poseidon was hidden in these divine quarrels. He did not strike with fire, nor roar like thunder and storms. Instead, his displeasure surfaced in silence, in tides that shifted. Earthquakes shook the ground when his anger pressed against the earth. The rivalry shaped him, tempered him, but never diminished his strength. For Poseidon was not only a god of waters, but of memory. He remembered every slight, every choice that placed him second. Yet his wrath was never blind. It carried purpose within its depth. With Athena, it was pride wounded by mortal choice. With Apollo, it was the reminder of betrayal's sting. With Zeus, it was the eternal struggle of brothers, crown against crown. Through each rivalry, Poseidon's hidden wrath grew heavier. Not violent, not reckless, but waiting like a storm on the horizon. Mortals saw only glimpses, flashes of power in flood and quake. But the true weight lay unseen, coiled beneath the calm of the sea. The rivalries of gods were not merely stories of conflict. They were echoes of balance, reminders that even gods clash for place. And Poseidon, lord of the deep, bore his wrath in silence. Not forgotten, not forgiven, but hidden beneath waves that touched every shore. For every storm begins not with thunder, but with quiet gathering clouds. And Poseidon's rivalries were clouds, waiting to break across the world. He remained patient, for eternity is long and memory never fades. Thus, his wrath, though hidden, shaped the tides of myth itself. Mortals have always dreamed of conquering what lay beyond their reach. They built ships of wood and cloth to challenge the restless sea. Each sail raised was a declaration of courage, and sometimes of arrogance. Poseidon watched as men carved paths across his endless blue domain. At first, they prayed before setting sail, voices trembling with hope. But over time, prayers faded, replaced by confidence in craft and skill. Mortals believed they had mastered the sea through knowledge and invention. They cut harbors into cliffs, built lighthouses that pierced the dark. They drove stakes into beaches, claiming land stolen from the tide. Every dock and every shipyard seemed to defy the gods' domain. Yet Poseidon, patient as stone, did not strike at once. He watched, silent as mortals pushed further across his waters. They dared to chart the unknown, to mark the sea with names. Maps grew crowded with lines, as if ink could bind the ocean. Still, the ocean remained unbound, for Poseidon allowed what he willed. But mortals mistook permission for conquest, and arrogance took root. They saw the sea as a challenge to overcome, not a power to respect. Each voyage that succeeded made them believe less in the god. Each harbor that stood firm made them forget who ruled the tides. Some kings declared the sea belonged to their empires, vast and proud. They claimed borders across waters that could never be contained. To Poseidon, these boasts were as small as shells on the shore. Yet every boast was a ripple against the silence of the deep. And ripples, when many, can stir even the calmest surface. Fishermen pulled nets heavy with fish, forgetting to give thanks. Merchants crossed oceans, their sails fat with profit and ambition. Explorers pushed past horizons, their eyes set on glory, not reverence. Mortals celebrated their triumphs, believing themselves masters of the sea. But the sea does not belong to mortals, nor does it bend to pride. Poseidon's silence grew heavier as mortals built their towers by the shore. He felt the weight of their ambition press against his eternal patience. The earth trembled beneath their harbors, but they did not listen. The waves whispered warnings, but pride deafened their ears. Sailors spoke of strange signs, winds turning sharp, tides shifting without cause. Whales vanished from coasts, currents pulled in unfamiliar directions. Yet still, mortals pressed forward, blind to the hand beneath the waves. To them, the ocean was a prize, not a god's dominion. But to Poseidon, every anchor dropped was a challenge, every wall defiance. His trident rested, but the storm coiled quietly in the depths. He remembered when mortals knelt, when prayers carried across the foam. Now he remembered silence instead, a silence born of neglect. The god's wrath was not noise or fury, but a gathering shadow. The challenge of mortals was not their ships, nor their harbors. It was their forgetting, their refusal to honor what outlives them all. For kingdoms fall and empires crumble, but the sea endures. Poseidon endures, patient and unbroken, waiting beneath the calm. Each act of defiance became a stone upon a scale. The balance shifted slowly until silence could no longer hold it. One day the sea would rise, not in anger, but in truth, and mortals would remember that no harbor is stronger than a tide. No ship is greater than the ocean, no king greater than its god. For the challenge of mortals is brief, but Poseidon is eternal. And in eternity, all arrogance drowns, and all pride is washed away. The sea has always carried voices, though few mortals know how to listen. Its waves are more than water. They are messages in motion. When the tide rises, it tells of change, of balance shifting unseen. When it falls, it speaks of calm, of patience, biding its time. Poseidon's voice is not thunder, but the rhythm of the waters. Each swell is a word, each current a thought moving through the deep. Sailors who respect the ocean hear these whispers in the foam. They sense when to wait, when to move, when to bow their heads. But many choose to ignore, believing their charts louder than the tide. The whispers grew stronger as mortals pressed further from the shore. Currents tangled where they should flow smooth, as if warning unseen. Birds circled waters with restless cries, vanishing before storms arrived. The sea began to carry moods, emotions that brushed the edges of fear. At dawn, waters shimmered with a strange stillness, heavy and watchful. At dusk, waves struck harder, as if testing the weight of land. Fishermen returned uneasy, their nets light though seas had been rich. Merchants spoke of ships slowed by currents, as if pulled by unseen hands. Explorers wrote of nights where stars blurred, their compasses spinning wild. And yet, their warnings turned into tales, stories dismissed by kings. Palaces laughed at omens, calling them sailors' superstitions. Priests spoke of blessings, yet altars to the sea grew neglected. And Poseidon listened, though not with kindness, but with gathering resolve. His whispers shifted to silence, the kind that chills a heart. For silence is not absence, but the pause before a storm. The tides crept further inland, higher with each moon's pull. Shorelines changed in quiet ways, unnoticed by those in power. Houses built too near the water began to sag with salt. Crops spoiled where rivers turned brackish under unseen hands. But still, mortals saw only the strength of their own making. Walls rose higher, ports spread wider, ships sailed farther. Every act meant to tame the tide was itself a defiance. And with each act, Poseidon's whispers turned into steady weight. It was not rage that stirred within him, but memory. He remembered the age when mortals honored the sea as sacred. He remembered offerings cast with trembling hands, prayers whispered with fear. Now those memories stood beside silence, the silence of pride. And silence pressed heavier than waves, heavier than storms. It carried a question unspoken. How long before balance breaks? The tides had become more than water. They were warnings. Every shore touched by them was a page in an unwritten tale. Every wave a verse in a song mortals refused to hear. And beneath it all, Poseidon's will remained, vast and unyielding. His wrath was not sudden, not cruel, but inevitable as the tide. The sea speaks always, yet mortals forget that silence is speech too. When whispers vanish, when calm is too still, danger waits unseen. For the ocean does not roar until patience has ended. And when it does, no ship, no harbor, no king will silence it. The tides had spoken, and their whispers carried a single truth. Mortals might command the land, but the sea belongs to Poseidon. And he does not forget, nor forgive the pride of forgetting. Beneath the glittering surface of the sea lies a world few mortals imagine. It is a realm of silence, where light bends and vanishes into shadow. Here, mountains sleep beneath waves, taller than any spire of men. Valleys stretch in darkness, older than empires, untouched by mortal hands. Creatures drift in silence, glowing with their own faint and secret fire. Currents weave unseen highways, paths carved long before human time. This is the kingdom Poseidon holds most dear, hidden from mortal eyes. The silent depths are not chaos, but harmony, a balance beyond reach. Mortals know only the surface, the restless waters, and sudden storms. But below, the ocean's heart beats slow, steady, eternal. It is here that Poseidon retreats when the noise of men grows loud. Here, he recalls when mortals honored him with reverence and awe. Now their prayers rarely reach so far, swallowed by their own pride. Their altars crumble, their offerings forgotten, their gratitude fading. Yet the depths remember, for the sea does not forget what it has carried. Bones of ships rest on the ocean floor, monuments to mortal arrogance. Statues toppled by time lie veiled in coral, watched by curious fish. The sea keeps these memories not in anger, but in quiet patience. Every sunken mast is a reminder, every lost sail a lesson ignored. Poseidon walks among these ruins as a shepherd among silent flocks. He feels the weight of forgotten reverence pressing heavier each age. The depths murmur with his thoughts, though no mortal ear can hear. They whisper not of vengeance, but of balance long denied. Balance is the ocean's law, and Poseidon its keeper eternal. Mortals build, mortals claim, mortals boast, but all returns to water. Stone erodes, wood rots, iron rusts, but the sea renews. Even in silence, the depths are alive, patient, watching. Fish move in silver clouds, their dance older than temples. Whales sing songs that echo longer than the span of kingdoms. Volcanoes stir in the dark, shaping earth unseen by human eyes. Every movement of the depths carries a message. All things return. Poseidon stands in that truth, unshaken by mortal defiance. He does not strike quickly, for the sea knows no haste. But when balance tips, when arrogance weighs heavier than respect, tides answer, and tides answer not in words, but in action beyond resistance. Still, Poseidon holds to patience, though silence grows thicker. He waits as only a god of endless sea can wait. The depths are his counsel, his memory, his certainty. And within them, wrath is not rage, but inevitability. For when mortals forget, the sea reminds. When mortals boast, the sea humbles. When mortals resist, the sea endures. The silent depths teach without cruelty, but with truth beyond denial. Even the greatest city is a shadow beside a wave. Even the proudest king is a whisper against the tide. And so, in silence, Poseidon watches, listens, remembers. The depths breathe with him, the darkness steady as his will. Above, mortals live in haste, blind to the balance they disturb. Below, patience gathers, eternal as the sea itself. One day silence will break, not in anger, but in truth. And the truth of the depths will rise, unyielding, eternal, undeniable. For the ocean waits, and Poseidon waits with it. The silent depths are not empty. They are full of memory, balance, and the weight of all forgotten prayers. There was a time when every shore held stones raised to honor the sea. Fires burned, incense curled upward, prayers drifted with the tide. Sailors knelt before voyages, offering wine, grain, and humble words. Fishermen bowed with gratitude, thanking Poseidon for the day's catch. Even kings sent gifts, gold and bronze cast into the waves. The sea was feared, revered, and treated as sacred beyond measure. But years passed, and altars crumbled under neglect and silence. Temples cracked, their pillars worn not by storms, but by forgetfulness. Offerings grew scarce, replaced by laughter of courts and pride of kings. The sacred bond between mortals and sea weakened like a frayed rope. Poseidon felt this change as a tide turning against the moon. For reverence feeds harmony, but neglect feeds imbalance. A fisherman might still whisper thanks, but his village no longer knelt. A sailor might still fear storms, but he no longer prayed. An empire might still use the sea, but it no longer bowed. The god of the deep watched as respect withered into arrogance. Every forgotten altar was a silence louder than storms. Every broken temple was a wound carved into memory. Poseidon is eternal, but gods too feel the weight of neglect. He walked unseen along forgotten shores, among stones lost to moss. He listened for prayers, yet found only the noise of markets. Ships left harbors with songs of pride, not hymns of humility. The sea gave, and mortals took, yet thanks vanished like foam. Even the smallest offering once balanced the vastness of the deep. But when offerings ceased, balance bent under mortal pride. The forgotten altars stood as witnesses to fading devotion. Birds nested in their cracks, roots split their stones. Children passed them by, never told their names, never knowing their weight. And the gods remember what mortals forget. Poseidon's silence grew colder as altars turned to ruins. He did not ask for riches, nor for endless sacrifice. He asked only remembrance, a thread between land and sea. Without it, mortals walked blind, thinking themselves sovereign. They mistook silence for approval, neglect for freedom. But silence is not absence, and freedom is not without consequence. The forgotten altars were warnings unheeded, shadows of what once was. They told of an age when harmony balanced mortal and divine. Now they stood broken, reminders of promises left behind. Poseidon's patience was vast, but even the sea has limits. Every tide is balance, every wave a measure, every silence a count. And with each altar left in ruin, the count drew closer. The sea does not forget the songs once sung upon its shores. It does not forget the hands that once trembled in prayer. Nor does Poseidon forget the silence that replaced them. In the forgotten altars lay a truth mortals refuse to see. To honor is not weakness, but wisdom before forces greater than self. To forget is not freedom, but a chain that binds in ignorance. And ignorance before the sea is a danger greater than storms. For storms end, but the sea endures, vast and eternal. So the altars stand, broken yet heavy with memory, and Poseidon waits, not in rage, but in certainty. For the tide always returns, and with it, the reckoning of what was forgotten. The sea has always been a mirror, reflecting the hearts of those who sail upon it. When reverence guided men, the waters carried ships gently across the waves. When humility filled prayers, storms bent and parted to grant safe passage. But when pride grew loud, the sea became restless, and its face turned dark. Poseidon, though hidden, was never blind to these changes. He walked the unseen currents, listening to mortal voices carried in salt air. Fewer voices spoke of gratitude, and more spoke of conquest. Kings spoke of empire, not harmony, and sailors sang of power, not respect. The sea became a tool in their mouths, not a living force to honor. Ships grew larger, built with arrogance, their sails filled with ambition. Mortals spoke of mastering the waves as though the sea could be tamed. But the sea is not mastered, nor is the god who rules it. Poseidon felt the sting of these words, as one feels salt upon a wound. Yet he remained silent, watching, waiting, patient as the depths. Mortals believed silence meant absence, that the god of the sea was gone. They mistook the stillness of the tide for indifference. But still waters hide vast power beneath their surface. Even the gentlest wave can grow into a storm unseen until it breaks. The ocean listens longer than mortals imagine, and Poseidon waits longer still. He recalled the times when altars stood high upon cliffs. He remembered the songs sung by sailors before each voyage. He remembered the trembling hands that offered thanks for a safe return. Those memories lived in him as tides live in the moon's pull. But memory alone cannot bind mortals to devotion. When respect fades, the bond frays, and the sea grows restless. Poseidon knew mortals would test boundaries, as they always have, but even he wondered how far they might go before the tide turned. For the sea holds balance, and balance cannot be ignored. Every calm demands a storm, every gift a reckoning. And mortals had taken much, yet given little. They built their cities with stones drawn from the earth. They built their wealth upon ships that cut across his waters. They built their pride upon the silence of forgotten gods. And still, Poseidon waited, for patience is vast in the heart of the sea. Yet within that patience, the first tremors of unrest stirred. Clouds gathered faintly upon horizons where none had lingered before. Winds shifted in patterns unnoticed by mortal eyes. Currents whispered in tones strange to even the oldest sailors. The sea was changing, not in fury, but in warning. For warnings often come softly, like ripples before a wave. But mortals, wrapped in pride, did not see them. They laughed at storms, survived, thinking themselves stronger than the sea. They mocked the silence of gods, thinking divinity a tale for children. And so the warnings went unheeded, as many warnings do. But Poseidon heard every word, every silence, every forgotten prayer. The tide within him deepened, heavy with memory and silence. For gods too carry wounds when forgotten. The sea can be calm for years, yet it never ceases to move. And Poseidon's patience, though vast, carried the weight of eternity. Mortals saw calm seas, but they did not see the shadows beneath. They saw silence, but not the truth waiting within it. And truth, like the tide, cannot be kept at bay forever. So the sea waited, and Poseidon waited with it. Not with rage, but with certainty. For tides always return, and what is forgotten always rises again. There's a weight that silence carries, heavier than thunder or waves. Poseidon bore that silence like a crown carved from forgotten prayers. It wrapped around him, vast as the ocean, deep as the trenches unseen. For every god lives through worship, and neglect is a shadow upon divinity. He was not alone in this fading of reverence. Other gods too felt the silence of mortals growing with each passing age. But Poseidon's domain was the sea, and the sea touches every shore. His presence was unavoidable, even when unacknowledged. Mortals may ignore the winds, yet they cannot live without breath. Mortals may forget the soil, yet they cannot live without harvest. And mortals may neglect the sea, yet they cannot live without water. This was the paradox that shaped his patience. He was both rejected and needed, forgotten and indispensable. Yet need without reverence twists balance into arrogance. Mortals demanded gifts of the sea while giving nothing in return. They spoke of rights over the waters, as though the waves could be owned. They carved maps with lines drawn across oceans. They claimed dominion over coastlines, bays, and harbors. But the sea laughs at such claims, for it cannot be held. The tide obeys no king, no empire, no mortal decree. Poseidon knew this truth as deeply as he knew the pull of the moon. Still, he watched, patient as ever, though silence pressed heavier. He walked unseen among cliffs, where temples once stood proud. He drifted through harbors where songs of prayer had turned to markets. He moved within storms that mortals called accidents of nature. Yet behind each current was his hand, behind each tide his will. For the sea is not chaos, though mortals name it so. It is balance, eternal and unyielding. And Poseidon is its keeper, though unseen. The silence of mortals became a mirror of their pride. They no longer feared the depths, believing themselves masters. But mastery is illusion when faced with eternity. The sea can wait a lifetime, a century, an age. Mortals cannot. yet they act as though their will alone shapes the world. Poseidon saw this, and his silence deepened. He was not a god of fire, quick to blaze with anger. He was not a god of the sky, striking fast with thunder. He was the sea, slow, steady, patient, enduring. But even patience has edges, as every shoreline proves. Waves may kiss the sand for centuries, yet they also carve stone. So too does the god of the sea carve through arrogance. His wrath is not sudden, but certain. It is not loud, but unrelenting. The silence was never absence, but warning. Every calm sea carried the promise of storm. Every still tide whispered of return. Mortals, wrapped in their pride, mistook these for gifts. But Poseidon counted them as debts. And debts, no matter how long delayed, are always paid. The silence of Poseidon was the gathering of a tide unseen. It was the pause before the wave, the breath before the storm. Not fury without reason, but balance demanding itself. And as mortals built higher walls and louder boasts, the sea listened. For Poseidon is eternal, and eternity is patient. But patience is not without end, and the silence of the sea is never empty. It is the sound of waiting, the weight of what is to come. The sea is vast, but within it, every secret leaves a trace. Whispers move through the currents, carrying truths mortals cannot hear. Fishermen sometimes pause, sensing eyes upon them in calm waters. Sailors sometimes wake, hearts racing after dreams of endless waves. These are fragments of Poseidon's presence, glimpses of his hidden watch. For the god of the deep does not vanish when forgotten. He lingers in silence, in the weight of the tides, in unseen depths. And within him grows the memory of devotion once freely given. He remembers the child who cast flowers into the surf. He remembers the widow who prayed for a husband lost to the sea. He remembers the king who knelt before building a fleet. Each act of reverence tied mortals to the ocean's balance. But now those ties fray, and Poseidon feels their unraveling. Mortals have not ceased to love the sea, but they have ceased to honor it. They see beauty in its waves, yet not the divinity within them. They seek riches from its depths, yet not the spirit that grants them. This blindness weighs heavier than storms. For storms are brief, but neglect stretches into ages. Poseidon walks through coral halls beneath the waves, heavy with silence. The songs of dolphins and the calls of whales echo in his solitude. Yet even these creatures sense a shift in their lord's heart. The ocean grows unsettled, though no storm breaks the surface. Currents twist strangely, and fish scatter without reason. Seafarers speak of odd tides, of stars shifting above their roots. These are not accidents, but murmurs of the god beneath. For imbalance always makes itself known, even when ignored. Poseidon watches mortals build higher walls along their shores. They boast of safety against floods, believing stone stronger than tide. They map the seas with precision, believing knowledge equals dominion. Yet no map can hold the ocean. No wall can resist eternity. Mortals mistake progress for power, and power for permanence. But the sea has seen empires rise and vanish like foam. It has watched proud names vanish as if they were never spoken. And Poseidon has stood through it all, unchanging, eternal. Still, the god is not untouched by what he witnesses. Every silence from mortals adds weight to the tide within him. Every boast without reverence deepens the stillness of his patience. For patience unending can become a storm held too long. And the sea does not release lightly once balance demands its due. He knows this truth, though mortals do not. He feels it as the moon feels the pull of tides. What mortals forget, the gods remember. What mortals ignore, the gods endure. And endurance, too, has its breaking point. Poseidon does not rage without cause. He does not strike without balance demanding it. But when the time comes, his presence will not be hidden. Mortals will look to the sea and remember what they have forgotten. Not through tales told by priests, but through the truth written in waves. For the sea is the oldest scripture, and Poseidon its eternal voice. Even now, silence grows, pressing heavier upon the world. Even now, the tide within him gathers, vast and unseen. It is not yet fury, but it is no longer calm. It is the beginning of remembrance, carried in salt and silence. And remembrance once stirred cannot be turned aside. The sea is endless, yet every wave carries memory. Poseidon, lord of the deep, remains a guardian, not a tyrant. His silence was never absence, but a measure of patience. Patience that stretched across centuries, longer than empires endure. Mortals often forget that silence can be a warning. They see calm waters and believe they are safe. They see gentle tides and think the sea is theirs. But the sea belongs to no one, not even the boldest king. It is eternal, and Poseidon is its voice. He does not seek vengeance, but balance, not destruction, but remembrance. He calls for respect, as simple as a prayer whispered to the tide. For the bond between mortals and gods is woven in reverence. When reverence fades, the bond frays and storms rise. Yet storms are not meant only as punishment. They are reminders, sharp but necessary, of humility. Humility before forces greater than any crown or throne. Humility before the ocean, before eternity, before the divine. Poseidon waits still, not in rage but in certainty. For the tide always returns, carrying with it what was forgotten. And mortals will remember, even if only in awe of the sea's power. They will stand at the shore, watching waves rise higher. They will hear the roar of the surf, louder than any war cry. They will see ships tremble, ports falter, walls crumble. And in that moment, they will know they were never masters. They were guests upon the water, and guests must show respect. Yet remembrance need not come through fear alone. It can come through gratitude, through songs, through offerings. It can come through a child's hand dropping flowers into the waves. It can come through a sailor's whispered prayer before a voyage. It can come through a city honoring the sea with care, not pride. For Poseidon does not demand gold, only reverence. Not endless sacrifice, only remembrance. To honor is to live wisely, aware of one's place in the order. To forget is to stumble, blind to the truth of balance. Balance is the law of the sea, and Poseidon, its keeper. Every calm rests upon it, every storm restores it. The gods do not fade when forgotten. They wait, patient as tides, certain as eternity. And Poseidon waits most of all, for he knows mortals must return. The sea feeds them, carries them, shapes their lives. No wall can keep it out, no map can hold it still. They may forget him, but they cannot forget the sea. And through the sea, they will remember him, perhaps in fear, perhaps in awe, perhaps in gratitude. But they will remember. When they do, the silence will break, the bond will mend, and balance will return. For the wrath of Poseidon is hidden not in rage, but in silence. And his gift is not fury, but the chance to remember. The sea endures, eternal, unyielding, vast. And Poseidon endures with it, watching, waiting, certain. For the tide always returns, and with it, the truth no mortal can escape. The sea remembers, and so does Poseidon.